AITA for finalizing the divorce after exposing my wife's secret pregnancy and affair. Hi, I'm a 29-year-old man, and my wife, Haley, is a 28-year-old woman. We've been married for 2 years. 2 years doesn't sound like a long time, but it's enough to find out which side of the bed she'll fight for, which shows she'll binge watch over and over until your brain melts, and which refrigerator drawer you can never touch because it's for her stuff. We met through friends at a barbecue, the kind where everyone brings the cheapest chips they can find and then argues about whether hot dogs count as sandwiches. Derek, one of our mutual friends, practically shoved me toward her like a high school matchmaker. Haley had a burnt hot dog on her plate, and I had a flat soda in a red cup. Very glamorous, I know. But she laughed at my terrible joke about the DJ. We exchanged numbers, and that's how it started. 6 months later, we were practically attached at the hip. Apps deleted, toothbrushes in the same cup, and Derek giving me vibes like he'd just closed $1 million deal. A year later, we signed a lease, and shortly after, a wedding. Our wedding was small, on a tight budget, memorable for one reason. The DJ thought it was still 2010 and played Pitbull like he was headlining Coachella. Haley cried during her vows. My eyes mysteriously got watery too. And everyone cheered when we cut a cake that looked better in the catalog than in real life. We danced, drank awful punch, and left in a car covered in shaving cream, courtesy of Derek. I work as a software engineer. Stable salary, decent hours. Nothing glamorous, but enough to keep the lights on and the Amazon packages arriving. Haley bounced from one retail job to another, but always made it clear that when we had a child, she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. She framed it as wanting to be present. But let's be honest, it was also because she hated every boss she'd ever had. I was fine with it. I like to work. She likes to plan. It seemed balanced. Before the wedding, she suggested a prenup. Not the most romantic proposal. Nothing says forever, like a lawyer explaining separate assets in a notary's office sandwiched between a vape shop and a dentist. But Haley insisted, and honestly, I didn't mind. It was simple. What's yours is yours, what's mine is mine, and we don't end up in a legal circus if things go south. She said it gave her security. It gave me clarity. We signed it. Howard, the notary, stamped it, and we went for tacos. Practical love. Fast forward to the second year of marriage, and the fertility Olympics began. People say trying for a baby is fun. Those people have clearly never had a Google Calendar dictating their sex life. Haley had 3 different apps, all beeping like NASA control panels, telling her when to jump me. Every other morning, she'd walk in waving an ovulation test like it was evidence in a trial. It went from exciting to clinical very quickly, month after month of negative tests, until failing pregnancy tests became our shared hobby. The jokes turned into sighs. The sighs turned into silences. Until one Tuesday at 6:11 a.m., Haley walks out of the bathroom, holding a test like she found a golden ticket in a chocolate bar. 2 pink lines, trembling, the dog staring, and me trying to remember what day it was. She announced it like breaking news. It's positive. My response: pizza night. Because that was our deal. If it ever came back positive, no alcohol, just pizza. She rolled her eyes, but ordered it anyway. Extra pepperoni. It wasn't an oops. The baby was planned with space launch precision. Haley already had a shelf in the closet labeled Little Human, with baby stuff, a stuffed rabbit with one crookedly sewn-on eye, onesies with clouds on them, and a book on sleep routines written by someone who clearly never had kids. She was already taking prenatals like candy, even before the positive test. This baby was a project. She was the manager. I was the investor. On paper, we looked like the wholesome couple Instagram tries to sell you. Baby's room in progress. Stable income. Prenup in the drawer for security. Haley was pinning cribs and pastel decor like it was her part-time job. I was reorganizing my office to make room for the crib she had saved in her favorites. Everything screamed, functional adults with a plan. The reality had cracks. Haley's phone was suddenly more protected than Fort Knox. Notifications face down, constant typing, girls' nights with people I didn't know. She'd come back late smelling like she'd been rolling around in someone else's air freshener. I asked. She brushed it off. You're overthinking it. Sure, because my favorite hobby is imagining my wife disappearing 3 nights a week with a group of imaginary friends. But I didn't push. We had been through months of fertility stress. I thought maybe this was her way of coping. Maybe the hormones were making her weird. And hey, we finally had the positive test. I thought things would settle down now, that she'd go full-on pre-baby mode and stop acting like her phone held state secrets. Instead, she was more distant than ever, like she was already halfway into another life. I didn't know it yet, but the let's quietly separate speech was just around the corner, and all the red flags I ignored were about to become a neon sign that said idiot. Then came the bombshell. For days. That's how long they were finally having a baby. Excitement lasted before Haley decided to blow it all up. For days after the positive test, she sits down at the kitchen table like she's about to read me my rights. No preamble, no how was your day. Just, I think we should quietly separate. I stared at her. Quietly. What is that supposed to mean? As if divorce was a noise complaint, and we had to keep it down after 10 p.m. I had my coffee in hand, half asleep, trying to decide if this was a joke. It wasn't. No lawyers, no drama, she insisted. No need to get anyone else involved. We can just figure it out between us. You would have thought she was talking about splitting the bill at Olive Garden, not ending a marriage. I asked if she was serious, and she gave me the kind of nod people use right before they do something really stupid that they think makes them look noble. So I asked the only logical question. Why? Why now? Because in case she'd forgotten, she was pregnant. The baby we planned for, the one she turned into a full-time job with all the apps, vitamins, and fertility charts. We finally got what we were trying for, and suddenly she's waving the white flag. Her answers sounded like they were pulled from a cheap breakup manual. I can't see a future with you. You were so cold, and I need this baby to grow up in warm, loving arms. I need to find myself again. You took so much of my life. No specifics, no examples, just vague platitudes she had clearly practiced in the mirror. It was like watching a terrible audition for a soap opera. I shot back. You literally just got pregnant like we always dreamed of. This is what we both wanted. We tried. I don't understand you, Haley. What the hell? She shrugged like she was changing her Netflix password. Things change. That was her big mic drop. Things change. Yeah, Haley. People change their hairstyles. You don't change your entire marriage like you're switching phone carriers. And the way she said it, so rehearsed, so flat, it didn't take a genius to realize she already had a backup plan in place. You don't start practicing. I need to find myself again, unless you're planning on saying it to someone else, too. At that point, I didn't know about Colton, but let's just say the writing was already on the wall in bold letters. I asked for real reasons. If I was supposedly so cold, I wanted examples. Give me a time, a memory. An instance where I supposedly emotionally froze you out. Nothing. The same recycled lines. I don't see a future with you. I need my life back. That was it. I could have put a tape recorder down and had the same conversation. So I called her on it. This sounds like you're reading from a script. She got defensive, which only made it more obvious. And when I reminded her that we just celebrated the pregnancy with pizza like normal people, she looked annoyed, like I was ruining her dramatic scene with facts. Finally, I cut through the nonsense. If you want to separate, fine. But it's not going to be quiet. There will be lawyers, there will be paperwork. We're not going to scribble this out on a napkin and call it a day. And whatever secret you're hiding, because I'm sure you're hiding something, I will find out. And none of this will be quiet. She rolled her eyes like I was the irrational one. You're being dramatic, she said. Dramatic? Because I expect a legal process to involve, legal professionals? What's next? Am I dramatic for filing taxes instead of just sending the IRS a dollar bill and a sticky note? We argued for another 15 minutes. Her script didn't change, and neither did my patience. She got angry that I wasn't just nodding along and agreeing to her DIY-style divorce plan. In the end, she stood up, muttered something about me being stubborn, and stomped off to the bedroom. Scene over. I sat there staring at my coffee, trying to make sense of the madness. For days. 4 days after the positive test, and she already wanted out. If anyone can solve that equation without the answer being, she has someone else, please post the formula. This is where most guys would try to convince themselves it's stress, hormones, or an emotional pregnancy roller coaster. I'm not saying it didn't cross my mind, but I'm also not blind. Haley had been glued to her phone like it was a pacemaker, having girls' nights with friends I'd never heard of, and now she was dropping lines about warm, loving arms. I might not have had proof yet, But my gut was already screaming that her quiet separation wasn't about self-discovery. It was about someone else. At that point, all I had were suspicions and her half-baked attempt to negotiate a secret breakup. I didn't know Colton was the mystery man from the apartment complex. I didn't know Derek was about to become an accidental whistleblower. I just knew Haley had pitched me the dumbest plan in the history of marriage, and I wasn't buying it. The thing about secrets is they're only fun until your mutual friend lives directly across from your wife's lover. Enter Derek, the human dashcam I didn't know I needed. Derek had recently moved into a new complex. He was still in the cardboard box furniture phase, where your coffee table is the TV box and you don't even have Wi-Fi yet. So you're forced to look out the window like it's 1995. That's how he saw Haley. Not once, but multiple times. At first, he thought she was just being nice, maybe helping another friend move. But she kept showing up. Same apartment, same elevator, same routine. One night, he calls me. Hey man, weird question. Why is Haley treating my neighbor's apartment like it's her second job? I thought he was kidding. I mean, Haley barely helps me carry in the groceries. Suddenly, she's offering moving services to a stranger? I asked if he was sure it was her. Derek didn't hesitate for a second. She walked right past me carrying a bag. I said hi. She said hi back. Unless you have a twin wife. Yeah, it was Haley. That was the moment the dots started connecting in neon lights. Her sudden need for a quiet separation, her phone glued to her hand, her girls' nights with non-existent people, and now she's a regular visitor at some guy's apartment in Derek's building. Spoiler alert, that guy was Colton. I didn't know his name yet, but every story needs a villain, and apparently, mine lived in 304. I asked Derek to keep an eye out, which wasn't hard since his entertainment options were watching Haley go into Colton's apartment or staring at his unpacked boxes. 2 days later, he calls again. She's here. Third time this week. Seems like she already knows the buzzer code. My suspicions were now turning into confirmation. But I'm not an idiot. You can't just storm and screaming if you don't want to look like the crazy one. So I start keeping records. Dates, times, texts from Derek. I even drove by once myself, and sure enough, there was Haley, walking in with the confidence of a tenant. No hesitation, no hiding, just strolling in like she owned the place. And then came the jackpot. Back at home, I was looking for a bill in her desk drawer and found something much better. A manila folder. Not hidden, not tucked behind tax documents, just sitting there like a piñata full of stupidity. The label: guardianship, adoption, Spencer. Real subtle, Haley. Nothing screams, totally innocent, like a folder announcing your crimes in 12-point font. Inside, it was worse than I imagined. Guardianship and adoption forms already filled out with Spencer's name. The father's line was blank. Blank. As if I, the actual husband, just ceased to exist because Haley got bored. Then there were invoices from a shady facilitator who seemed to operate out of a P.O. box, charges for placement and expedited processing, and the piece de resistance, a budget worksheet. A full Excel spreadsheet Haley had made where she mapped out how she was going to spend the child support after she got rid of me. Rent, nails, self-care, vacations, and in the smallest possible print, a line item that read diapers, $10. $10 for diapers. The rest went straight to the Haley Incorporated Fund. I actually laughed out loud when I saw it. She had basically written her own indictment. And if that wasn't enough, at the bottom of the folder was a handwritten letter, a backroom deal, explaining that Spencer would handle the actual parenting while Haley collected the support checks every month, like she was subletting her own child. At this point, it wasn't even shady anymore. It was documented level stupid. That was my breaking point. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. I had evidence, documents that could walk into a courtroom by themselves and win a case. So I called a lawyer. Enter Mr. Lawrence, the kind of guy who talks about restraining orders with the same tone you'd use to order lunch. I tell him everything. The folder, Derek's sightings, the quiet separation proposal. He doesn't even blink. We'll file immediately, he said, already opening a legal pad. And we did. Divorce petition, motions for temporary restraining orders, a ban on relocation, a prohibition on any adoption or guardianship without court approval, preservation of evidence. Basically, a full legal leash. It was like watching a chess match, but with lawyers instead of pawns. Then came the formal service, Because no matter how dramatically you want to stage a breakup, it doesn't count until you've been served. You don't slide divorce papers under the door like junk mail. You hire a process server. First attempt, fail. Haley avoids the doorbell like it's a salesman. Spencer answers, but plays dumb. Second attempt, success. She opens the door, sees the guy, tries to play dumb. Doesn't matter. Papers delivered. Time logged. You've been served. Now she couldn't pretend this was some quiet separation agreed upon over coffee. This was real. And I was standing there with Mr. Lawrence, ready to show Haley and Spencer what quiet really means when the legal system gets involved. When people talk about a turning point, they usually mean something exciting or satisfying. For me, it was walking up to Spencer's house with my lawyer and a pile of evidence that made Haley look like she was running a Craigslist for babies. Picture it, Saturday afternoon. Spencer's neighborhood has lawns so well manicured you know the HOA fees are funding something serious. My lawyer, Mr. Lawrence, gets out of the car with me, briefcase in hand, like he's about to sell vacuums door to door. Except instead of vacuums, he's carrying restraining orders, affidavits, and an entire folder labeled Haley's Bad Decisions. We ring the bell. Spencer opens the door looking like she's seen a ghost, probably because she wasn't expecting a lawyer in a three-piece suit on her porch. Behind her, Haley appears in sweatpants, hair up, looking like someone who thought she was going to spend the day binge-watching Netflix and pretending the world didn't exist. Instead, she gets me and Mr. Lawrence on her doorstep. I don't even speak at first. I let Mr. Lawrence deliver the opening remarks. He moves forward like he's narrating a documentary. Calm, professional, but with enough of an edge to make it clear Haley isn't going to win this. Mrs. Haley, he begins. We are here to inform you that your plan for guardianship transfer and fraudulent use of potential support funds has been fully documented. Any attempt to proceed with this scheme will result in immediate legal consequences, including but not limited to criminal charges. Haley's face goes from pale to red and back to pale. Spencer looks like she wants to melt into the floor. Mr. Lawrence continues. He opens the manila folder I found at home. He pulls out sheets like a magician pulling scarves. Adoption papers with Spencer's name on them. Financial notes about spending child support on self-care and vacations. And the cherry on top, the handwritten agreement between her and Spencer. It's not just embarrassing, it's evidence. Haley finally explodes. You can't do this to me. It's not what it looks like, she yells. Mr. Lawrence doesn't even flinch. It's exactly what it looks like, he responds. And a judge will agree. I suggest you stop yelling and start listening. That's when I step in. And your quiet separation, Haley? I say, did you really think you could just pawn our child off on Spencer and collect a check like it's a side hustle? She looks at me like she wants to argue, but she has no argument. And then the meltdown begins. Haley's voice goes up 3 octaves. She starts pacing the room, shouting that I never supported her, that I was cold, that this baby deserves better. She's repeating the same lines she rehearsed at the kitchen table, but now with extra yelling and finger-pointing. You don't understand, she shrieks. I can't be trapped with you. I needed a way out. She turns to me directly, tears streaming down her face, but rage in her voice. Please, don't do this. We can fix this. We don't have to tell anyone. Just let me handle it. Mr. Lawrence doesn't even look at her. He calmly puts the papers back in the folder and says, You already told everyone, Mrs. Haley. On paper. In your own handwriting. Then he stands up, looks at me, and says, We're done here. Haley lunges toward me, practically begging now. Please, don't take everything from me. I'll fix it. Please. Her voice cracks, desperation spilling out, but it's too late. I just shake my head and walk out behind Mr. Lawrence. That was the moment it really hit her. None of her plans were going to happen. Not the quiet separation, not the child support cashback scheme, not the planned adoption with Spencer. It all came crashing down the second that folder landed in a lawyer's hands. She knew exactly how bad her situation was. A week later, the paperwork festival began. Filings, hearings, motions. Mr. Lawrence moved to join Spencer to the case, and she got served too. Haley tried to play it cool in front of the judge at first, but the binder of evidence spoke louder than her excuses. The draft guardianship alone was enough to make the judge raise an eyebrow, so high it almost touched his hairline. Add in the budget worksheet with diapers, $10, and vacations, underlined twice, and even Spencer was squirming in her seat. Haley couldn't keep up the act. Halfway through the hearing, she lost it, yelling, pointing at me, crying, pleading. "You can't do this to me. You were supposed to take care of me. You're my husband." The judge banged his gavel like he was playing whack-a-mole, telling her to sit down. It didn't matter. Everyone in that room saw exactly who she was: desperate, sloppy, and exposed. Meanwhile, Colton, the great upgrade of a boyfriend, was conspicuously absent. Not in the courtroom, not in the parking lot, not even in spirit. He was already sneaking out the back door of this mess, probably looking up cheap one-bedroom apartments while she was melting down in front of a judge. By the end of the day, the court issued temporary status quo orders that would go into effect at birth. I would have primary possession upon hospital discharge, no relocation, no hearing, and no adoption or guardianship without court approval. Spencer's name was now on the record, too, which I'm sure made for some very awkward family dinners. So yeah, Haley went from bragging about her quiet separation to screaming at me in front of a judge while my lawyer stacked evidence against her like he was playing Jenga. And that was just the beginning. Here's what no one tells you. Court doesn't end when the gavel falls. This isn't Netflix. The credits don't roll. It's paperwork, postponements, hearings, and months of dragging your life through the mud until you wish you'd just run off to Montana to raise goats. The weeks after the first hearing were chaos. Haley doubled down on painting herself as the victim. She suddenly filed countermotions trying to sell the adoption folder as preliminary ideas and the budget worksheet as therapeutic journaling. Yeah, right. Because nothing says self-awareness like budgeting $10 for diapers while planning spa trips with child support money that doesn't even exist yet. Poor Spencer tried to stay on the sidelines, but her name was all over those documents. You can't fake innocence when your signature is next to a note that basically says, "Yeah, I'll raise your kid while you go live your best life on his support." The judge didn't openly say child trafficking, but the words fraudulent intent came up more than once. And when lawyers start saying fraudulent intent, you're not walking out of there on your way to Starbucks with a smile. Meanwhile, Haley's pregnancy was progressing. She was showing quite a bit, and every time we had to be in court, her belly was right there, front and center. A part of me felt bad for the baby, not even born yet, and already with more court appearances than many criminals. Of course, Haley tried to use the pregnancy for sympathy. But judges aren't idiots. They've seen every sob story there is. They don't care if you're 7 months along when the documents in front of them look like a manual on how to defraud your husband. Derek remained my unofficial wingman through all this. He'd update me whenever Haley showed up at Colton's apartment, though the visits started to drop off. And by drop off, I mean Colton stopped answering the buzzer. The guy figured out pretty quickly that dating Haley was like trying to hug a hornet's nest. One week, Derek texted me, "Haven't seen her in days." Colton moved a couch out. "Looks like he's gone." And just like that, Mr. Upgrade vanished. No goodbye, no court support, not even a cringy Facebook post about new beginnings. He bailed before the ink on Haley's countermotions was dry. I don't blame him. Who wants to date someone whose idea of co-parenting is outsourcing the baby to her sister so she can fund a spa budget? Haley did not take it well. You'd think losing the boyfriend, her fake plan, and her credibility in court would make her reflect. Nope. She came to the next hearing like she'd chugged 3 energy drinks, screaming at me in front of the judge. At one point, she stood up mid-proceeding and yelled, "You're destroying my life because you can't handle that I don't love you anymore." The judge literally had to threaten her with contempt to get her to sit down. Everyone in the room just watched, half horrified, half entertained, while Mr. Lawrence slid another piece of evidence across the table like he was ordering dessert. Financially, the reality hit her too. Because guess what? Prenups don't disappear just because you're tired of your husband. That ironclad document she insisted on signing before we got married meant she wasn't getting my money, my stuff, or any of the things she thought she'd walk away with. And since she hadn't worked in months by choice, her only hope was the child support scheme, a scheme the court now had documented in black and white as fraud. The judge indicated that temporary primary custody would go to me, unless Haley could prove it was in the baby's best interest. And every time she opened her mouth, she proved the opposite. In one hearing, She turned on Spencer and screamed that it was all her fault. Spencer just stood there, frozen, while Haley ranted about how she was promised help and backed into a corner. The judge took more notes, and Mr. Lawrence shot me a look that said, "She's doing half my job for me." By this point, I was numb to the drama. All I cared about was the baby. I repeated over and over to the judge, to the lawyers, to anyone who would listen, "I want custody. I will raise my child. She can have supervised visits if she gets her act together." The judge seemed to agree, especially after Haley's courtroom meltdowns. No one wants to hand a newborn over to someone who can't get through a hearing without screaming like a lunatic. The months blurred together with court dates. Haley unraveling, Spencer hiding, Colton gone. And then one morning, a text from Spencer. "She's at county hospital." It started. No details. Just that. I grabbed my go bag and drove straight there. Admissions already had the case number. Mr. Lawrence had made sure the orders were scanned in ahead of time, so the receptionist didn't even bat an eye. She typed in my name, pulled up the file, and printed me a wristband. There was a small hiccup when someone tried to check the father unknown box, but the file already showed marital presumption and the court order, so they corrected it and printed me the right band. No one argued. The file spoke louder than anyone in that building. I got to the floor, and a nurse pointed me to the room like she'd been expecting me. Haley was in the bed hooked up to the monitor, muttering with Spencer and watching the door every time someone walked in, like at any moment I was going to be swapped out for a mannequin. It didn't matter. The file had my name on it. The orders had my name on it. The wristband had my name on it. Paper always beats theatrics. The birth wasn't a movie montage. It was hours of machines humming, staff rotating, and me filling out forms the way I like them, correctly. When the baby finally arrived, he made a sound like a tiny trumpet announcing his presence to the entire wing. Clean tests, normal stats, nothing scary, exactly the kind of boring you want. At that point, I signed every line I was supposed to sign. The nurse handed me the form for the birth certificate. I wrote my name, checked the boxes, and watched the copier spit out the proof. No blanks, no mysteries, no reprints. Spencer tried to step in and offer advice she'd read on forums. The nurse wasn't having any of it. She stuck to the form and the file. Haley tried a soft plea about a fresh start. I followed the script Mr. Lawrence had coached me on. No hallway deals, no handshake agreements, everything through the case number. Discharge was exactly according to the status quo plan. The hospital social worker pulled the order from the binder, read the bullet points to make sure no one pretended to be surprised later, and confirmed the exit details. A tech checked the car seat like it was his religion. The baby passed all the checks. The nurse scanned one last barcode, and we walked out the front door like civilized people who actually read instructions. Court resumed the following week because the judge wanted the real schedule in writing now that the baby existed and wasn't just on an ultrasound. Same room, same judge, same tired wall clock. Mr. Lawrence showed up with a binder that looked ready for an audit. Haley showed up with Spencer in a diaper bag that still had the tags on it. For what it's worth, Colton's chair was still empty. Derek had texted me the day before. Colton moved out at dawn. U-Haul 2 guys. Perfect timing, like he was dodging a bill. The hearing wasn't a thriller, it was a review with consequences. Mr. Lawrence walked through the main points. The folder from Haley's desk with Spencer's name on the forms, the payment transfers labeled like a shopping list for a bad idea, the calendar entries, the email headers, the prior testimony, the served orders, and the hospital paperwork confirming parentage. He didn't need dramatic pauses. He just placed each document where it belonged and let it sit there. Haley tried to revive the "I was misunderstood" routine. She insisted the adoption forms were brainstorming and the budget sheet was financial planning. She said the stipend memo was a joke. The judge stared at the pages for a long time and then asked her why jokes needed banking apps and fee schedules. She didn't have an answer that didn't sound like a hole. Then she went big. She stood up and launched into a speech aimed at me, not the judge, about families and forgiveness and second chances. It didn't work. The judge told her to sit down and address the bench or leave the room. She tried again, louder, waving her hands for emphasis where none was needed. The bailiff shifted like a human reminder. Mr. Lawrence waited for the room to stop echoing and continued as if someone had just coughed. The orders came down, clear and measured. Joint legal custody, because that's the standard unless someone burns the building down. Primary physical custody to me, with a detailed step-up schedule, the clerk typed as the judge spoke. Pickup times, exchange location, medical responsibilities, all mapped out like a bus route. Geographic restriction. No moving out of the county or contiguous counties without a hearing and a signed order. Supervised visits for Haley at a center that runs on stopwatches and log sheets. Spencer barred from any attempt at guardianship or adoption related to my child unless expressly invited by the court, which is to say, never. An evidence preservation order, just in case anyone suddenly wanted to lose a phone. The money didn't become a drama. The prenup handled the property, so the court didn't spend a second on it. Child support was calculated, as it always is, with a formula that doesn't care about your feelings. The number wasn't a lottery or a punishment. It was just what the math said. The judge looked at Haley's lawyer and said the word sanctions regarding my attorney's fees for the extra mess created by the folder plan. Her lawyer muttered something about appeals and timing. The judge set a separate date to determine the amount once he reviewed financial statements. In normal speak, she would be paying for part of my costs once the paperwork confirmed it. It's not optional, not theoretical, just pending. In the weeks after the hearing, the supervised visits ran like a train schedule. Haley showed up on time twice, late once, and not at all once. The staff logged everything. I kept the handoffs brief, and the receipts went straight into my folder. Nothing personal, just process. Mr. Lawrence moved the rest through smoothly. The final decree was entered, certified copies in hand, and the clerk's seal stapled to what looked like a phone book. The divorce was finalized. The court reserved the issue of fees pending financial verification. That was the day I walked out of the courthouse. Not triumphant, not bitter, just done. Haley tried one last text through her lawyer to reconsider the terms. Mr. Lawrence replied with 7 words, "The terms are orders. Feelings are not." And that was the end of it. Spencer disappeared from the picture. I don't know if she found another distraction or finally understood that family court doesn't take sisters playing lawyers seriously. The facilitator never resurfaced either. I guess they changed names, emails, and maybe countries. Colton was already history. At home, life settled into a routine you don't notice until it becomes stable. Feedings, naps, pediatrician visits. Derek stopping by with food and gossip about the new tenant in 304. Predictable. The kind of boring I wanted. The court tied up the last loose end with an order on fees. Haley was ordered to pay $18,400 to cover a portion of my legal costs. Not ruinous, not symbolic, just the actual price of trying to turn a baby into a side hustle, payable on a schedule with consequences for noncompliance. And that was it. Custody secured, divorce finalized on paper, and the noise gone. What was left was paper, orders, signatures, names spelled correctly, and a baby who knows nothing about any of this and doesn't need to. The storm passed. The paper remained. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.